Welcome back to another VFX tutorial, and this time I wanted to show you a little bit extra concerning particles, because the traditional stuff which you normally see is you create one particle, then it was done thing, and then it is over. But I have some new stuff for you, because that function wasn't available, at least I hope so, when I did my last particles tutorial. So this will be a follow-up. Of course, I will give you a quick and brief introduction into particle systems, so very quickly, so you understand what's actually going on. So stay tuned. This is OneUp Indie. I am the developer of the indie game Clunky and Office Orc. So if you are new here and you definitely want more, consider subscribing, so you can actually help me out grow this channel bigger. That would be sweet. And of course, comment, share, and so on is much appreciated. So what am I actually talking about here when I say new functions? So normally when you create your particle system and then you create your particle like this, you spam it on the screen, then normally this does one thing and then it stops. But now there is a new function where you can actually chain together one particle and then another one is happening. So for example, here what you're seeing on this radial in the middle, it's shooting out those greenish things and then they die, so it ends, and then another one is being replaced by this, which is pretty cool. Or for example, something like this, because normally, let's go into Photoshop to actually illustrate that stuff. Can I draw? Yes, I can. Sweet. So normally you have a particle and then you define its value. For example, it goes somewhere in here or here or here, but it's normally just from one point or from a specific space, but they go from one point and then they shoot up. But for example, what if you want to have this point, this point, this point, and this point, and they need to go into the center? So this is one tricky question. It's not too tricky in the end, well, but you will see what I mean in the end, what that is, because that maybe is a problem for you and you actually wanted to do some particle systems, but you were not sure how to do this. So once again, what are particles and what are particle systems? So basically you create those things in one object. You can call it whatever you like: object, particle, radial, something, or just object, particle setup. Because a lot of times you just set it up once and then you can use those particles anywhere. So you just call them up and say, hey, I want to use my particle now, once you set it up front in your game. So the first thing which you need to understand about particles is they need to have a system around them. So just imagine it like this. You have, let's say, this candy holder here, which has lots of candies inside, and those candies are those particles. So this is a bigger one, and then what you do, you define those particles which are inside the system, and then you can use and fire them out. So basically you're just defining all of them which there are inside, and then you're taking one out and say, hey, let's fire this one out because I want to see it on the screen. So this is basically it. Easy peasy. So let's say, for example, you normally, let's go into this one, no step event. So normally what you would be doing, this is once again the same stuff. You just go particle system, you create a system inside this object, which you then put into the room. So let's kill those guys. In the step event, let's follow the mouse, but this is of course just so you actually see it a little bit better. And then normally what you would be doing, so you create your particle system, you can say part system create, and then of course without layer if you don't want to have this like this, but let's say you want to have it on a specific layer because some things are overlapping and some not, then you have a little bit more control. Then you say, hey, is this stuff persistent? So is it going to the other room? So is GameMaker Studio like saving that stuff for other rooms? Normally you just go 0, because maybe if you transition between rooms, you don't maybe need it because you go in some other areas where your particle systems are not being used. So this is how you set it up. And then you say, hey, we want to have one of those balls which are inside here. We want to define it, so we create it. So particle, you can of course call it particle something, doesn't really matter. And then you go part type, let's say for example part type, and then you have lots of options. So how it is, what kind of alpha it is having, so how transparent is it, so from just one value to 3 values. So alpha 3 for example would be 3 values, and this just means during its lifetime what is the first alpha value, what is the last one, what is it in between. So these things are kind of linked in between. Or for example, I don't know, what can we have? Blend, if they are overlapping, are they blending together? Or for example, a specific color. Here they put in a new one, so color HSV or color mix. So this is new stuff, which is kind of interesting. So these functions, as far as I know, didn't exist, or color RGB. I'm not gonna go into that. They're just making your life easier, because now you don't have to use this very rigid system, which still you can use in GameMaker Studio, but I didn't like it. That was very specific GameMaker Studio color coding, which was kind of clunky in my opinion. So they kind of made it better here, which I definitely like. And then what do we have? Death. This is a new one. So here, death and step, definitely new stuff. Or for example, type destroy. I guess this one did exist. So you can actually during runtime destroy those particles, which is pretty sweet. So before that you created the particle and it was flying out, but you really didn't have any control over it, because well, that was just the thing and then it was over. So here they're giving you a little bit more control, which is pretty sweet, and I like the way this is being handled. So type. So what else do we have exist? Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Gravity, pretty cool if you want to curve let's say a movement. Life, this is super important, how long that thing is around. Orientation, well, what kind of angle it is having. Scale, if you want to make it bigger or smaller. And then shape, these are predefined shapes, so I'm just going quickly over that stuff. Size, if you want to increase it, what kind of starting size, end size, or between what kind of random values, let's say, this thing will be. So this is kind of important as well. What do we have? And then of course a sprite, and here type step. So here let's start with the easiest part. So what I wanted to do is a thing which is something like this. I want to have 4 points and they're being spawned, and then this particle is going inside something like this. So this could be used for, let's say, charging animation if you like it. I tried it, didn't look good, so I'm not going to show you this one here. But what do I need then? First of all, let's say I'm having a particle which is just this white thingy here. So this is this blurry image, and now how I divided this thing is I'm having an alarm, and then I loop inside the alarm, because I'm just in the end say, hey, alarm set. Therefore I'm just setting off the alarm once, and then it will repeat every 40 steps. So well, let's say a little bit, 2/3 of a second this thing loops, and then I'm firing off a particle, or here 4. So what I do, alpha, color and life, not too important in my opinion. And then is speed, because well, I want it to go in a specific direction, and then increase it a little bit. So here let's go downwards. No coding, so just watch it so you actually understand what's happening. And then size, I give it a specific size, and then I reduce it. So basically this thing is biggest, and then it's going smaller, and then well, we are at this point. So for now, if you would be doing everything in the create event and fire off those particles, it would be possible to do something like this in all kind of directions, but not this approach. This is very important to understand. So what I do in the alarm, I take one particle and say, hey, direction and orientation of this very specific particle gets a very specific angle. So 45 would be now this way. So what do I do? Okay, I just say, hey, create this particle. So particles create. I'm creating this particle with those kind of presets. So for the direction and orientation. So I'm just saying like, hey, rotate it correctly with the orientation and go in this very specific direction which I want to do. And then I just give it one value. Pull it up a little bit so you can actually read it. And then I just give it a specific direction and angle. So basically 45 degrees. And now the great part about this one is, okay, so I'm having one particles which I do from the system. So here our system, I need to put in system, then a specific position. Our position is minus and plus a specific distance, which I defined once, and then I reuse it for all the other ones. So I'm just saying, hey, I'm having those 4 points. So I'm going minus and downwards, so minus and plus, and then give it a 45 degrees. So this one already I defined. And now what I need to do is then create the next particle, but change the setup of the original particle, which is set up here, to a different angle. And this is how it works. I basically override this predefined thing. So this little particle here, this yellow one, I just override its direction and orientation, and therefore I can then create this one and this one and this one. So this is how it works. And as you can see, the same code for the same particle. So basically I'm just overwriting its properties so I can achieve my goal and give it a different angle. For now, as you can see, now it's 135, and 135 is, which one is it? So basically this is going in this direction. So I'm just going to the right and down, and then it can go in this kind of direction. And then of course the other things, a third angle and a fourth angle, which is again overwriting the initial particle in its direction and orientation. So let's start it again. Come on, start it. And what you will see is the result, which is kind of looking cool. So this is, for example, used, let's say, for example, something is being marked, and then there's a bombardment or whatever, or something is happening on this very specific spot, or it's just marking something, which is an easy thing. So here, easy peasy stuff, and let's kick it out because I don't need it. Now let's go to something which is, I guess, a little bit more interesting. So this is, of course, yeah, you can do other stuff, but let's say, for example, we go into the Nova, and this one is kind of interesting because it consists of 2 particles. So once again, what is it doing? And it has, first of all, a radial kind of explosion. It reminds me of, if you played Diablo 2, this, what was it? Toxic explosion or something it was called. It doesn't really matter. And then you're having a thing which has the correct orientation and direction, so it goes in the correct, as you can see, and then it leaves behind those things here as a second particle. So how is that set up? Quite easy. Once again, a particle system, and then I create my first particle, which once again has a speed, a size, and life. Very similar stuff, nothing really changed here. And then I do the same stuff with the alarm, but as you can see, I loop with a for loop, and I'm not gonna do this. Of course, I could do this I++, which would be a standard. So this could be, of course, a valid way too. But now I would be creating 360 versions of that. As you can see, this would be kind of, it's kind of interesting as well as an effect, but I wanted it to be a little bit more distinct, and therefore I just have an I variable, and then I just say, hey, this is the condition 360, and then I'm adding 20, so I'm just having a step of 20, and therefore I'm not having so many, I'm just having less of those things. And then once again, direction, orientation, I'm overwriting the initial particle which we set up here, or I'm overwriting its direction, its orientation, and then I just create one with those overwritten values. And what kind of values? Well, the ones which we having in the loop. So 0, then 20, then 40, and so on. And therefore I create this kind of cool Nova effect from, well, the position X and Y. And this is how you get it. So this is the cool stuff. But now you're thinking, wait a minute, but how do we create this lingering part which we have in one particle, and then we come to the other one? And this is the interesting thing, because there is a thing which is called part type depth or part type step. And here be careful what you use it for, because for example, if you use this part type death, then you need to put in, first of all, well, your particle which you define, how many you are creating, and what kind of particle needs to follow after the first particle, which is defined here as the regular particle. What kind of particle are we putting in? What you could do is put in the original particle and it would work, but this is creating an infinite loop, and then at some point it will crash your system. So just keep that in mind, to not abuse the system. Of course, you can have minus values, and as far as I know, this just means you have a chance, and therefore it cannot be unlimited. But it didn't work out correctly for me, so therefore I'm not doing anything. So what I'm putting in after the death of the first particle, I put in the second one. Why is that here and, for example, not here? Well, because the particle stay I created well, a little bit later, therefore I just have it as a specific separate line, so you see the distinction. So what is the second particle stay doing? Basically, it has a very short life. It is using a different thing, so I don't have to worry about, well, what kind of orientation it has, and because it's not moving, we just keep it radial. Of course, once again, we do the same coloring, so see lime. Of course, I could put in color 1, so it doesn't really matter. And then I just have it appear 1 second. It is not moving, so speed 0, and size is very small, and it is becoming a little bit bigger. And well, so what is happening? Once again, I loop, create the first particle, override its well, direction orientation every time. So every time I having a 1 second loop, and then I just create this particle on one specific spot. And then after the life, which is defined by 65, so after 1 second and 5 steps, it will create this guy here, and then this guy is created, then it has a short life, and then everything is over. What you can do is part type step, and this would kind of loop. I didn't test it because here you're actually really creating infinite loops, so here just keep that in mind. This is very well, this could create lots of troubles, and therefore I just use the type death, and then I guess this is good enough. So here we have the first one. What do I have? Filler. So for example, here is the other one, which could be maybe an interesting effect. I didn't want to show it at the start because, well, it is quite, as you can see, it is a screen filler, but it is a pretty cool effect. And then what you see is basically this radial thing, but with 360 ones. And then they have a very short life, or maybe a longer life. This is of course then a random value, and therefore every time it ends, it can be here or somewhere there, and therefore you see a pretty neat distribution of those well, greenish dots at almost the whole screen. So how does that look like in practice with a filler? So once again, as you can see, same method I'm creating, but this time 360 particles in all directions, and then this is basically the same code, no problem. But here what I do, I just give it a distinct life, which could be between 65 and 125, and therefore you see it flies off maybe longer or shorter, and then it will pretty much fill the whole screen with those guys, which are completely the same as before. And now the last thing, which is the fireworks. So let's put that onto the screen. Of course, this thing will be free for you guys, so this will be a Patreon project, but it will be free for everybody, no problem. So you could actually use it for creating a firework, which is this guy. So this is one thing which is just firing up, and then I'm creating kind of a nova of those particles. So how does that look like? I guess you can almost imagine it. So this is once again same code, nothing really changed, but now we're just creating 30 of those, which are going upwards on the same spot on the same time. But here we're creating 30 of those particles. As you can see, they just have one direction, but the second particle has a direction at the create event defined between 0 and 360, and therefore, as you can see, this is just the only change, and therefore we give it some speed as well of 2. So the one thing is just shooting upwards, death, and then the other ones are being created, and therefore you can kind of emulate and make your own fireworks if you like. And of course, if you say, hey, this looks too lenient, so let's go for speed, let's go between 1 and 2, and now this will even appear more random. So let's check it out again, going up, and this looks already pretty cool. Let's say like an explosion or something which is scattering around. And of course, if you say like, hey, let's even make it even more chaotic, so let's go for C. What kind of color are we putting in then? Let's go for maroon and C blue. Yeah, let's go for blue, black, blue. And let's check it out. And this is now definitely fireworks. So let's check it out again. As you can see, pretty neat effect, of course. They all have the same coloring, but it kind of looks interesting, and you can play around with it if you like. Of course, if you want to change the colors, what you could do is, of course, then say, nah, I want my color to be a random value. So here's how you can actually set it up as well. So we want to go with one color, var, and then color, and then choose. So this one is pretty cool, so we can actually put in lots of colors if we like, so we can override that stuff. So maroon, blue, see red, see yellow, see God knows what do we have, fuchsia, no idea what that is, let's take it, sounds good to me. And then we just put in this one color, and now we definitely have a randomized version of our fireworks. So let's check it out. This will, I guess, look correctly now. This is kind of interesting. It shouldn't be this. So why are you doing this? So 30 times we have to repeat it. Put in one color we put out. This is kind of interesting. It shouldn't be like this. Actually, if you repeat something, this means it would repeat the same variable and choose a different color, but it's not doing it. Not sure why that is. So actually every particle should be having a different kind of color, but it's not. Oh well, maybe I'll find out later what I actually did wrong here, but still looks kind of interesting anyway. So hopefully that was of interest to you, and now you have a good insight into particles once again. So particle system, the box where you have all the stuff in, initialized, then your little particles were flying out. Now the regular stuff, which is just shooting from one point, then we actually want to have it differently from 4 points or whatever. Or for example, you have like lots of points, and then what you could do is, for example, if you have something like a radial thing and you go from here to here to here, this is what you can do with the same approach which I showed you from those 4 points. Then you need to just get those points, so, and change the direction and the orientation if you want to have effect which is kind of loading or whatever. So that was pretty much it for today on those, oh my god, 24 minutes. Have a good one. One up indie.